Right now, beneath the surface of the ocean, something extraordinary is happening. Tiny animals, no bigger than your fingernail, are building the largest living structures on Earth. They've been at it for thousands of years. These are coral reefs, and tonight we're going down to meet them. The ocean floor holds cities built grain by grain, structures that stretch for thousands of miles, all made by creatures so small you could hold 100 in your hand. This is where we're heading. This is what we'll discover together. Get comfortable, find your spot, let the day fall away. We're going somewhere special, to a place where patience becomes architecture and time becomes stone. What you're picturing right now might be wrong. Most people think corals are plants, bright, colourful underwater plants swaying in the current. Or maybe you think they're rocks, beautiful formations of stone, like the landscapes you'd find in a cave. But here's the truth that changes everything. Corals are animals, living, breathing animals. They don't have eyes or brains or hearts the way you do, but they're alive. And that simple fact opens up a world of wonder, because if corals are animals, then how do they survive while staying completely still? How do they eat? How do they grow? How do they build structures that last for millennia? Let's start small. At the heart of every coral reef is something called a polyp. Picture a tube, soft-bodied, delicate. At the top of this tube is a mouth. Around the mouth, tentacles. Thin, graceful tentacles that wave in the water, like fingers feeling for something in the dark. A single polyp is smaller than a rice grain. Some are the size of a pinhead. You could hold thousands in your palm and barely feel their weight. And yet, this tiny creature is building something vast. Here's where it gets beautiful. A coral polyp never lives alone. It clones itself. 1 becomes 2. 2 become 4. 4 become thousands. Millions. All connected. All sharing nutrients. All building together. Their family, their colony, their one giant organism made of countless individuals. If this peaceful journey into the ocean brings you calm, I'd love for you to join our community of science lovers. Hit that subscribe button and become part of this quiet space we're building together. And tell me, where are you listening from right now? What time is it where you are? I always wonder who's out there sharing these moments with me. Drop a comment, let me know you're here. Now, back to our tiny architects. Each polyp sits in a cup it builds for itself. A skeleton made of calcium carbonate, the same material as seashells, as limestone. The polyp extracts calcium from seawater and deposits it, molecule by molecule, into a protective home. When that polyp dies, its skeleton remains, and the next generation builds on top of it. This is how reefs form, layer upon layer, generation upon generation, the living sitting atop the dead, building higher, spreading wider, creating structures so large they can be seen from space. But here's what strikes me most. Each polyp, in its entire lifetime, might build just a few millimeters of skeleton. That's slower than your fingernails grow, slower than almost anything else in nature. A reef the size of a car could take 50 years to form. A reef the size of a house could take centuries. The Great Barrier Reef, the largest coral reef on Earth, is thought to be somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 years old. When it started growing, humans were just beginning to farm, to build the first cities, to write the first words. And all that time, these tiny animals were doing their slow, patient work beneath the waves. They don't rush. They can't rush. They simply are. Eating, growing, building, existing in a rhythm so slow, it's almost like being still, almost like being stone. But they're alive, every single one of them, alive and working and creating something that will outlast them by thousands of years. That's the secret at the heart of coral, the paradox that makes them so compelling. They're animals that look like rocks. They're builders that never move. They're ancient, yet constantly being born. They're individuals, yet never alone. And we're just beginning to understand them. Let's talk about time. Not the time on your clock right now. Not the hours in your day, but deep time. The kind that stretches back so far it becomes hard to picture. Because coral reefs have been here, building and growing, longer than almost anything else you can point to in human civilization. The Great Barrier Reef started forming around 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. Think about what that means. When the first corals began building what would become the world's largest reef, humans were just figuring out agriculture. We were planting the first crops, domesticating the first animals. We didn't have writing yet. We didn't have cities. We were still living in small groups, hunting and gathering, telling stories around fires. And beneath the waves, polyps were building. The pyramids of Egypt are roughly 4,500 years old. They're ancient. They inspire awe. But the Great Barrier Reef was already 1,500 years old when the first pyramid was built. It had already been growing, expanding, thriving for longer than all of recorded human history. Some individual coral colonies are even older. Scientists have found brain corals in the Caribbean that are over 1,000 years old. One single colony, alive today, but born when Vikings were sailing to North America, before the Crusades, before the Renaissance. That colony has been sitting in the same spot for a millennium, surviving hurricanes, temperature changes, everything the ocean could throw at it. Still growing, still adding millimeters to its skeleton every year. Here's what gets me about that timescale. Imagine you're that coral colony. You grow so slowly that a human lifetime passes like a single breath. Empires rise and fall, coastlines change, and you're there through all of it, doing one thing, building. Coral reefs are the oldest living ecosystems on Earth. They've existed for over 500 million years. Before dinosaurs, before trees, they survived 5 mass extinctions. They outlasted nearly everything. But let's bring this back to something you can touch, something closer. Think about a building you know, maybe your home, maybe a school you went to. How old is it? 50 years? 100 if it's really old. Now imagine that building growing itself, one brick at a time, one grain of mortar at a time, and imagine it takes 100 years to add a single floor. That's the pace of coral. Patience isn't even the right word for it. It's something beyond patience. It's existing in a different relationship with time entirely, where time doesn't feel like it's passing, where there's no rush because there's nowhere else to be, nothing else to do except grow. Every year, a coral polyp might deposit a layer of skeleton the thickness of a sheet of paper, sometimes less. In a human lifetime of 80 years, that's a stack of paper about the height of your hand. That's all. That's the work of an entire life. But multiply that by millions of polyps. Multiply that by thousands of years. And suddenly, you have structures that stretch for thousands of miles. Reefs that create entire ecosystems. Foundations that change the shape of coastlines. The Great Barrier Reef is so large it affects weather patterns. It's so vast that it creates its own climate. And it was built one microscopic layer at a time, by animals that can't see what they're creating, that have no concept of the final structure. They just build, generation after generation, each one adding its tiny contribution to something incomprehensibly large. And here's the beautiful part. It's still happening, right now, tonight. As you listen to this, coral polyps all over the world are depositing calcium, building their skeletons, adding to reefs that might be thousands of years old, or starting new reefs that won't reach their full size for thousands of years to come. They're building cathedrals they'll never see completed, creating art that won't be finished for millennia, working on projects that began before human history and will continue long after we're gone. That's the work of coral, patient, persistent, eternal, and we've only just begun to explore what they're really doing down there. Now let's zoom in, all the way in, to the thing doing the actual work. A single coral polyp is smaller than a grain of rice. Some species are the size of a pinhead. Others are so small you'd need a magnifying glass to see them clearly. Hold up your hand right now. Look at your fingernail. A polyp would fit comfortably on the white part at the tip. You could line up 20 of them across your thumb. This is what builds the Great Barrier Reef. This tiny, soft-bodied animal. This speck of life. The scale of it breaks your brain a little. Something smaller than a pea creating structures you can see from space. It's like saying an ant could build a skyscraper, or that a single grain of sand could become a mountain. Except it's real. It's happening right now in every coral reef on Earth. Let's look at what a polyp actually is. Picture a tube, soft and flexible. The bottom of the tube attaches to rock, or to the skeleton of another polyp. The tube itself is the body. Simple. No bones, no shell. Just soft tissue, vulnerable and exposed. At the top of this tube sits the mouth. One opening that serves as both entrance and exit. Food goes in. Waste comes out. Same hole. It's efficient. Nature doesn't waste complexity where simplicity works. Around the mouth, tentacles. Usually between 6 and 12, depending on the species. These tentacles are thin, delicate. They wave in the current like grass in wind. And along each tentacle, tiny, stinging cells. Thousands of them. Each one loaded with a microscopic harpoon. When something small touches a tentacle, the harpoons fire. They inject venom, they stick into the prey, and the tentacle curls inward, bringing the stunned creature toward the mouth. The polyp eats zooplankton this way, microscopic animals floating in the current. Things so small you couldn't see them without a microscope. The polyp catches them one by one and digests them in its simple tube body. That's it. That's the whole animal. Tube, mouth, tentacles, stinging cells. No brain, no heart, no eyes. A nervous system so basic it's barely more than a network of connected cells. And yet, this creature builds. Inside its soft body, the polyp has special cells that can extract calcium from seawater. They take dissolved calcium carbonate and turn it into solid skeleton. Molecule by molecule, they deposit it underneath themselves, building a cup, a protective home. The polyp sits in this cup like a person, sitting in a bathtub. When the polyp clones itself, the new polyp builds its own cup right next to the first. They stay connected. They share nutrients through tiny channels in their tissue. 1 becomes 2. 2 become 4. 4 become thousands. All sitting in their cups, all connected, all building. The cups merge together. They become a structure. That structure grows. It branches or forms plates, or creates massive domes, depending on the species. But it all starts with one polyp, one tiny, simple animal making one tiny cup. Here's what amazes me. The polyp doesn't know it's building a reef. It has no concept of the structure it's creating. It's not planning, it's not designing, it's just living, just existing, just doing what its DNA tells it to do. Build a cup, clone yourself, keep building. And somehow, that simple action, repeated millions of times by millions of polyps over thousands of years, creates something magnificent, something complex, something that changes the ocean itself, the smallest builder, the largest structure. That's the paradox of coral. That's the miracle we're trying to understand. Each polyp lives its small life. It eats, it grows, it reproduces, it dies, and its skeleton remains, a foundation for the next generation, a grain of rice, building a wonder of the world, one microscopic layer at a time. But the polyp isn't alone. It has a partner. Actually, millions of them. Inside the tissue of every coral polyp live tiny algae, single-celled plants so small you'd need a microscope to see one. They're called zooxanthellae. The name sounds complicated, but what they do is simple. They make food from sunlight. This is one of nature's perfect partnerships. The algae live inside the polyp's tissue, protected and safe. And in return, they photosynthesize. They take sunlight and turn it into sugar, energy, food, and they share it with the coral. Think about that for a moment. The coral is an animal. Animals eat other things to survive. But coral has figured out a way to farm, to grow food inside its own body. The algae do the work of capturing sunlight and turning it into energy, and the coral gets up to 90% of its nutrition from them. That's right, 90%. Most of what a coral needs to survive doesn't come from catching zooplankton with its tentacles. It comes from these microscopic plants living in its tissue. The coral is part animal, part walking garden. So, what does the algae get in return? A home, yes. Protection from predators. But also something more valuable. Waste products. The coral produces carbon dioxide when it breathes. It produces nitrogen compounds when it digests food. These are exactly what algae need to photosynthesize and grow. The coral's waste is the algae's food. Perfect efficiency. Nothing wasted. Everything shared. This partnership is so old it's hard to know when it began. Some scientists think coral and zooxanthellae have been together for hundreds of millions of years. They evolved together. They depend on each other so completely that most reef-building corals can't survive without their algae. They're two species that function as one. Here's where it gets beautiful. The zooxanthellae are what give coral its colour. Those brilliant yellows and greens and browns you picture when you think of coral reefs. That's not the coral itself. That's the algae living inside it. The coral tissue is actually translucent, see-through. You're looking at millions of tiny plants packed so densely inside the polyp that they create solid colour. Different species of zooxanthellae produce different pigments. Some are golden brown, some are green, some are olive or rust-coloured. The coral looks different depending on which type of algae lives inside it. It's like the coral is wearing clothes made of microscopic plants. And the relationship goes even deeper. The algae help the coral build its skeleton faster. Scientists aren't entirely sure why, but corals with zooxanthellae deposit calcium much more quickly than corals without them. Maybe the algae remove waste products that would slow down skeleton formation. Maybe they produce something that helps the process. Whatever the mechanism, the presence of these tiny plants makes the coral a better builder. This is why reef-building corals only grow in shallow water. They need sunlight, not for themselves, but for their partners. Go too deep, and there's not enough light for the zooxanthellae to photosynthesize. Without photosynthesis, there's no food. Without food, the coral starves. Without coral, there's no reef. The whole structure of coral reefs, their location, their depth, their size, is determined by this partnership, by the need for sunlight, by these microscopic algae doing their quiet work inside every polyp. Think about that the next time you see a picture of a coral reef. All that color, all that life, all that abundance. It starts with something invisible, something you can't see with your naked eye. Millions of tiny plants, each one smaller than a speck of dust, living inside millions of tiny animals, working together to build something vast. Two organisms, one life, one structure. That's the secret of coral. That's how something so small can build something so large. They don't do it alone. They never did. They work together. They share. They depend on each other completely. And it works. It's been working for longer than humans have walked the earth. It will keep working long after we're gone. The partnership continues. The building continues. The reef grows, one microscopic collaboration at a time. So how does this partnership actually work? How do these microscopic plants make food inside an animal? The answer is light. Sunlight hits the ocean surface and begins its journey down. The water absorbs some wavelengths immediately. Red light goes first, filtered out in the top a few meters. Then orange, then yellow. The deeper you go, the more color disappears from the light spectrum. By the time you reach 30 feet down, you're in a world of blues and greens. This is the light that reaches coral reefs. Not the full rainbow of surface sunlight, but a filtered, quieter version. Blue-green light, soft and steady. And this is what the zooxanthellae use. Inside each polyp, packed into the tissue, millions of these algae cells are absorbing photons, particles of light. Each photon carries energy from the sun, energy that traveled 93 million miles through space, and then filtered down through layers of ocean. And when that photon hits a zooxanthellae cell, something remarkable happens. The algae captures it, uses it, turns it into chemical energy. This process is photosynthesis, and it's the foundation of almost all life on Earth. Plants on land do it. Algae in the ocean do it. It's the original solar power, perfected over billions of years of evolution. Here's how it works in simple terms. The algae takes water from the coral's tissue. It takes carbon dioxide from the coral's waste. And it uses light energy to break these molecules apart and rebuild them into sugar. Glucose, pure energy in chemical form. Water plus carbon dioxide plus light equals sugar plus oxygen. The sugar becomes food. The algae uses some of it to grow and reproduce. But most of it, that precious energy captured from sunlight, goes to the coral. The algae releases it into the surrounding tissue. The coral absorbs it. And suddenly, the coral has energy without having to hunt for it, without having to catch prey. It's being fed by its internal garden. This happens constantly. Every second that light is available, the zooxanthellae are working, capturing photons, making sugar, feeding the coral. A single square inch of coral tissue might contain millions of algae cells, all photosynthesizing at once, all producing food. And this is why coral reefs are so productive, why they support so much life. Because the corals aren't just animals competing for limited food resources. They're partly self-sufficient. They're farming light, turning something intangible, something you can't eat or touch, into solid nutrition. The oxygen produced during photosynthesis doesn't go to waste either. The coral uses it to breathe, so the algae provides both food and oxygen. The coral provides both home and raw materials. Each gives the other exactly what it needs. The exchange is perfect. Now think about the colours again. Those brilliant yellows and golds and greens. You're seeing photosynthesis happening in real time. Those pigments, those colours, are the machinery that captures light. They're like solar panels built into living cells. The brighter the colour, the more active the photosynthesis, the more food being produced. A healthy coral reef is a factory of light. Millions of polyps, each containing millions of algae, each algae capturing thousands of photons per second. All that light, all that energy from the sun being transformed into life, into growth, into the slow, steady building of reef structures. And it all happens silently, invisibly. You can't see photosynthesis occurring. You can't hear it or feel it. But it's there. It's always there when the sun is up. This quiet miracle happening in every coral polyp, in every reef, across every shallow tropical sea. The sun feeds the algae feeds the coral builds the reef, and the reef becomes home to thousands of other species. All because of light. All because these tiny plants figured out how to breathe underwater sunshine. That's the alchemy of coral. That's the magic we're witnessing. Light becoming life. Energy becoming structure. Photons becoming stone. And it's happening right now, as you listen to this. Right now, somewhere in the ocean, light is filtering down through blue water, and coral is turning it into something solid, something lasting, something beautiful. The coral feeds on light. It builds, slowly. It lives for centuries, but it still needs to reproduce. And when it does, something magical happens. Once a year, on a specific night, determined by the moon, coral reefs explode with life. It's called mass spawning, and it's one of the most spectacular events in the ocean. Millions of polyps across entire reefs release their eggs and sperm at exactly the same time. All at once, in perfect synchronization. Picture this. You're underwater at night. The reef is dark, the polyps are extended, tentacles waving, and then they begin. From every polyp, tiny bundles emerge, eggs and sperm wrapped together, smaller than a grain of rice, pink or orange or red, and they float upward, through the water, like reverse rain. Within minutes, the water is filled with them. Thousands, millions, billions, so many that you can't see through them. The ocean becomes a blizzard of coral spawn, all rising toward the surface. It's like swimming through a galaxy, through stars being born. This is how coral reproduces sexually. Each bundle rises to the surface, breaks apart, and releases its contents. Eggs and sperm mix in the open water. Fertilization happens there, in the darkness, under the moon. The resulting larvae will float for days or weeks before settling on the reef to begin new colonies. But why all at once? Why this mass synchronization? The answer is survival. If one polyp released its spawn alone, the ocean's filter feeders would eat it all. Fish, shrimp, anything that feeds on plankton would gobble up every egg and sperm cell. There wouldn't be enough to create the next generation. But if everyone spawns together, if the entire reef releases trillions of bundles simultaneously, the predators can't eat them all. They get overwhelmed, saturated. There's too much food to consume. And that means some spawn survives. Some larvae make it. The species continues. This strategy is called predator satiation. Flood the ocean with so many targets that some must escape. It's the same reason cicadas emerge by the millions. The same reason some trees drop all their seeds at once. Safety in numbers, taken to an extreme. Now here's the remarkable part. How do the corals know when to spawn? How do millions of polyps across miles of reef coordinate this event? They follow the moon. Specifically, they wait for the full moon in late spring or early summer, depending on the hemisphere. The moon's light triggers hormones in the coral tissue. It sets an internal clock, and the coral counts. It measures the lunar cycle. When conditions are right, when the moon is full and the water temperature is perfect, the signal goes out. Spawn. Scientists aren't entirely sure how the signal spreads. Maybe it's chemical. Maybe one coral spawning triggers the others nearby. Maybe they're all independently reading the same environmental cues. But however it works, the result is precise. Entire reefs spawning within the same hour. Sometimes within the same 15 minutes. Different species spawn on different nights. One night, the brain corals. The next night, the staghorn corals. Staggered across a week or two, but each species has its designated time. And it happens every year. Same moon phase, same season. Reliable as clockwork. The ocean's calendar, written in spawn and starlight. For the coral, this is their one chance at genetic diversity. Most of the year, they reproduce by cloning, making copies of themselves. But once a year, they mix genes. They combine DNA from different colonies. They create offspring that might be stronger, more resilient, better adapted to survive. The spawn rises, the eggs fertilize, the larvae develop, and a few days later, they sink back down, searching for a place to settle. Most won't make it. Most will be eaten or swept away, or fail to find suitable habitat. But some will. Some will land on rock or dead coral skeleton. They'll attach, they'll metamorphose into polyps, and they'll begin building. One night of synchronized magic, one underwater blizzard, and from it, the next generation of reef builders. The cycle continues, moon after moon, year after year. The ancient dance of reproduction, timed to the sky. The spawn settles, the larvae transform. A new polyp begins its life, and now comes the waiting. Because coral grows slower than almost anything else you can think of. A healthy coral polyp might deposit 2 to 3 millimeters of skeleton per year. That's about the thickness of 2 sheets of paper stacked together. In 12 months of constant building, of extracting calcium from seawater, day and night, that's all it creates. 2 millimeters. Your fingernails grow faster. Your hair grows faster. Bamboo, the fastest growing plant on Earth, can grow 3 feet in a single day. Coral takes a year to grow less than half an inch. Let's put that in perspective. A brain coral the size of a basketball might be 100 years old. A massive table coral, the kind that spreads like a dinner plate, could be 200 years old. Those giant boulder corals you see in photographs, the ones taller than a person. Some of them started growing before the United States was founded. There are coral colonies in the Caribbean older than any living tree, older than any animal you could name. They've been sitting in the same spot, adding millimeters year after year, through hurricanes and storms and changing ocean temperatures. Through everything. Think about what that means for a reef. A healthy reef might grow upward at a rate of maybe 10 to 15 millimeters per year total. That's all the polyps combined. all their work added together. Half an inch. A good year gets you half an inch. To build a reef 10 feet tall would take 240 years, minimum, and that's in perfect conditions, with ideal water temperature, perfect water quality, no storms, no disease, no disturbance. In reality, it takes much longer. This is why damaged reefs can't simply bounce back, why a boat anchor dragging across coral can erase decades of growth in seconds, why development and coastal construction cause such lasting harm. You can destroy in minutes what took centuries to build. But here's what amazes me about this slowness. The coral doesn't know it's slow. It has no concept of time the way we do. It's not frustrated by the pace. It's not wishing it could build faster. It simply builds at the rate its biology allows, one molecule at a time, one layer at a time. There's no hurry because there's nowhere to go, no deadline to meet, no competition to outpace. Just the steady, patient work of turning dissolved minerals into solid structure. And somehow, this glacial pace creates abundance. Because while one polyp is adding its tiny contribution, millions of others are doing the same. Each one slow, together enormous. The collective work of countless individuals, each moving at a crawl, builds ecosystems that support a quarter of all ocean life. It's counterintuitive. We think fast is better, efficient, productive. We value speed and growth and rapid development. But coral teaches us something different. That slow can be strong. That patience can create permanence. That the longest lasting structures are built gradually, with care over time. Your body replaces most of its cells every 7 to 10 years. You're essentially a different person, physically, than you were a decade ago. But that coral colony, it's still the same. The skeleton laid down 500 years ago is still there, unchanged, supporting the living tissue at the surface. In a world that moves fast, that changes constantly, that values innovation and disruption, coral just keeps doing what it's always done, building, slowly, patiently, grain by grain, and it works. It's worked for 500 million years. It will keep working at the same patient pace for as long as the conditions allow. There's something deeply calming about that, something that quiets the rush and hurry of modern life. To know that somewhere, right now, coral is growing, not quickly, not dramatically, just steadily, reliably, adding its microscopic layer to structures that will outlast us all. The slowest growth, the longest life. That's the way of coral. Slow, yes, but how does it actually happen? How does a soft-bodied animal create something as hard as stone? The answer is chemistry. Simple, elegant chemistry happening inside every polyp. Seawater contains dissolved calcium, not much. You can't see it or taste it, but it's there, mixed into the ocean at a molecular level. Calcium carbonate, the same substance that makes up seashells and limestone and chalk. It's everywhere in the ocean, invisible, waiting to be used. The coral polyp has specialized cells at its base. These cells can grab calcium ions from the water and combine them with carbonate ions. When these two elements meet, they form a crystal, solid calcium carbonate, and the polyp deposits this crystal directly beneath itself. One crystal at a time, one molecule at a time, building a foundation. Think of it like this. Imagine you're sitting in a room filled with invisible building blocks. You can't see them, but you can reach out and grab them from the air around you. And every block you grab, you place beneath your chair. Slowly, your chair rises. The pile of blocks grows. You're building a tower without ever moving from your seat. That's what coral does. It sits in one place and pulls building material from the water itself. It extracts dissolved minerals and turns them into solid architecture. The structure it creates is called aragonite. It's a specific crystal form of calcium carbonate, harder than your bones, more durable than most rocks. And the polyp arranges these crystals in precise patterns. Not random, not haphazard, organized, strong. The base of each polyp's cup has radiating ridges, like the spokes of a wheel. These ridges provide structural support. They distribute stress. They make the skeleton stronger than it would be if it was smooth. The polyp is engineering without knowing it. Evolution has programmed it to build smart, not just to build. As the skeleton grows, the polyp lifts itself up. It stays at the surface, at the top of the structure it's creating. The old skeleton below becomes foundation. The new skeleton above becomes home, layer upon layer upon layer. And here's the remarkable part. The polyp does this while doing everything else, while eating, while hosting its zooxanthellae, while reproducing, while responding to currents and temperature and threats. Skeleton building happens in the background, automatic, constant. Even at night, when the polyp extends its tentacles to feed, the cells at its base are still depositing calcium. Even during storms, when the polyp retracts for safety, the building continues. It never stops. As long as the polyp is alive, it's creating skeleton. The ocean is full of calcium, more than enough for every coral on Earth to build with. But getting it out of solution, turning it from invisible to solid, that takes energy. The zooxanthellae help here too. Their photosynthesis produces compounds that make skeleton formation easier, faster, more efficient. This is why coral reefs exist only in tropical waters. The warm temperature helps. Calcium carbonate deposits more readily in warm water than cold. And the shallow depth brings light for the zooxanthellae. Everything works together. Temperature, light, chemistry, biology, all aligned to make skeleton building possible. Different coral species build different structures. Brain corals create massive domes, built to withstand hurricanes. Staghorn corals build branching structures, lighter and faster growing. Table corals spread wide, capturing maximum light for their zooxanthellae. Each shape is a strategy. Each structure a solution to the challenge of survival. And all of them are built the same way. Calcium pulled from water. Crystals deposited cell by cell. Time turned into stone. The Great Barrier Reef, the largest structure ever built by living organisms, is made entirely of calcium carbonate. Every inch of it extracted from seawater by polyps no bigger than a grain of rice. The ocean dissolved, became the ocean solid. Water became reef. And it's still happening. Right now, billions of polyps are pulling calcium from the sea, building their cups, adding to structures ancient and new. The chemistry continues. The construction never ends. From water, stone. From stone, home. From home, an entire ecosystem. All because a tiny animal learned to crystallize the ocean itself. Stone built from water. Structures that last for centuries. But there's something else about coral that catches your eye before anything else. The colors. Coral reefs are some of the most colorful places on Earth. Electric blues, neon greens, deep purples, brilliant yellows, colors so bright they almost seem artificial, like someone painted the ocean floor with fluorescent markers. We already know part of the story. The zooxanthellae provide those golden browns and olive greens. The algae living inside the tissue photosynthesizing, creating visible color through their sheer numbers. But that's not the whole picture, because some corals glow, actually glow, not in the way things reflect light, but in the way they absorb one color and emit another. They fluoresce. And the proteins that make this happen are unlike anything else in nature. Fluorescent proteins. That's what scientists call them. These are molecules built by the coral itself, woven into its tissue. They absorb light at one wavelength and release it at another. Take in ultraviolet, give back blue, take in blue, give back green. The light changes color as it passes through. Shine a ultraviolet light on certain corals at night, and they transform. What looked brown or tan in daylight suddenly blazes with color. Greens so bright they hurt to look at. Reds that seem to pulse. Oranges and pinks, and colors that don't have names. The reef becomes a light show. But why? Why would coral produce proteins that make it glow? Scientists are still figuring this out. The best theory is that it's about light management. Remember, coral needs sunlight for its zooxanthellae, but too much sunlight, especially the harsh UV rays that penetrate shallow water, can damage the delicate tissue. The fluorescent proteins might act as a sunscreen. They absorb the harmful UV light and convert it to safer wavelengths that the zooxanthellae can use. It's protective and productive at the same time. Defense and feeding in one elegant solution. Some scientists think the glow serves another purpose too. Communication, attracting certain fish or repelling others. Signaling health to potential spawning partners. The colors might be a language we're only beginning to decode. What we do know is that different corals produce different fluorescent proteins. Some glow blue, some green, some red or orange. The variety is stunning, and each protein is a unique molecule, a specific arrangement of amino acids that happens to catch and release light in just the right way. These proteins have become incredibly important to science. Researchers extracted them from coral and learned to use them as biological markers. You can tag a cell with fluorescent protein and track where it goes in the body. You can watch neurons fire in real time. You can see cancer cells moving through tissue. The Nobel Prize in Chemistry was awarded for this work, for taking coral's glow and turning it into a tool that revolutionized biology. All from studying why coral is colorful. But forget the science applications for a moment. Just think about what this means for the coral itself. It's living in a world of filtered blue-green light. The sun's full spectrum gets absorbed by the water. What reaches the reef is limited, muted, and the coral responds by making its own color, its own light. It takes what little brightness penetrates the depths and transforms it, amplifies it, makes the reef floor glow with colors that wouldn't exist there otherwise. It's like the coral refuses to live in darkness. Even 30 feet down, even in the blue filtered world of the ocean, it creates rainbow brilliance. It turns the seafloor into something magical. And at night, when bioluminescent creatures swim past, when the reef should be dark and quiet, the coral still holds its color, still glows faintly under certain lights, still refuses to disappear into shadow. This is coral's hidden talent, not just building, not just surviving, but shining, creating beauty in the deep, making light where light shouldn't be. The rainbow's secret isn't the sun, it's the coral itself, glowing with proteins millions of years in the making. Nature's own gentle nightlight, burning slow and steady in the ocean dark. The coral glows. It builds. it feeds on light. But its greatest achievement might be something else entirely. It creates home. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor. Less than 1%, a tiny fraction of the total ocean. And yet, they support approximately 25% of all marine species. 1/4 of everything that lives in the sea depends on coral reefs for survival. That's over 1 million species. Fish, crustaceans, mollusks, sponges, worms, echinoderms. Things with shells and things without. Things that swim and things that crawl, and things that just sit and filter water. All of them living in, on, or around coral. The reef is an apartment building. The coral creates the structure, and everyone else moves in. Think about what the skeleton provides. Cracks and crevices, caves and overhangs, hiding places, thousands of them. A single brain coral the size of a car might have hundreds of small holes and spaces where creatures can shelter. From predators, from currents, from the open ocean's dangers. Small fish tuck themselves into coral branches at night. Eels live in the gaps between colonies. Octopuses squeeze into impossibly small spaces in the reef structure. Shrimp claim tiny territories and defend them. Crabs scuttle through the maze of calcium corridors. The reef provides what open ocean can't: safety, structure, complexity. And with complexity comes opportunity. Every niche becomes a home for something specialized. Fish that eat coral polyps. Fish that eat the algae growing on dead coral. Fish that eat other fish. Fish that clean parasites off larger fish. Fish that live their entire lives inside a single coral head, never venturing more than a few inches from home. One study counted over 600 fish species on a single healthy reef. 600. Different sizes, different shapes, different colors, different strategies for survival. All because the coral built a structure complex enough to support them. But it's not just fish. Look closer. Between the coral branches, Christmas tree worms extend their spiral feeding fans. They look like tiny decorative trees, filtering plankton from the current. Touch near them, and they snap back into their tubes, disappearing into the coral skeleton in milliseconds. Sea urchins graze on algae. Starfish hunt slowly across the reef surface. Nudibranchs, colourful sea slugs, creep along, looking like aliens. Mantis shrimp, with eyes more complex than any camera, wait in burrows they've carved into dead coral. The coral itself becomes real estate. Premium space. A good coral head with lots of structure and protection can house dozens of species at once. The top might host one family of fish, the sides another, the base yet another. And inside the skeleton, in the maze of pores and channels, even more. It's vertical living, like a city rising from the seafloor. Every level occupied, every space claimed. And the coral doesn't just provide shelter, it provides food. The mucus, the coral, produces feeds some species. The zooxanthellae that leak from damaged tissue feed others. The coral spawn, when released, feeds millions. Even dead coral, the skeleton left behind, becomes habitat for algae and invertebrates that larger animals eat. The entire food web traces back to coral. Remove the coral and the ecosystem collapses. The fish leave, the invertebrates die, the reef becomes rubble, and rubble can't support the diversity that living coral does. This is why coral reefs are called the rainforests of the sea. Not because they're on land, obviously, but because they share the same characteristic. Incredible biodiversity packed into a relatively small space. More life per square meter, than almost anywhere else on Earth. And it all starts with one tiny polyp building, one tiny cup. That cup becomes part of a colony. That colony becomes part of a reef. That reef becomes home to thousands of species. From one, many. From simple, complex. The apartment building of the sea, constructed grain by grain over centuries, now houses 1 million neighbours. All because coral builds not just for itself, but for everyone. 1 million species live on the reef. They swim and hunt and hide. But the coral itself, it mostly stays still, except at night. When the sun sets and darkness comes to the reef, something changes. The polyps, which stayed contracted during the day, begin to emerge. Tentacles unfurl. The coral transforms from smooth stone to fuzzy carpet, from dormant to active. This is feeding time. During the day, the zooxanthellae do most of the work, photosynthesizing, providing up to 90% of the coral's energy. But that other 10%? That comes from hunting, and the coral hunts at night. The tentacles extend slowly, each one thin and delicate, covered in those microscopic stinging cells we talked about earlier. They wave in the current like grass in a gentle breeze, sensing, waiting. The ocean at night is full of zooplankton, tiny animals so small you'd need a microscope to see most of them. Larval crabs, baby shrimp, copepods no bigger than a grain of sand. They rise from the deep ocean in massive swarms, coming up to feed on phytoplankton near the surface. Billions of them, drifting in the current, and the coral waits in that current, tentacles extended, patient. When a piece of zooplankton touches a tentacle, the stinging cells fire instantly. Thousands of tiny harpoons, each loaded with venom. They stick into the prey. They inject toxins that paralyze. And the whole process happens faster than you can blink. The tentacle curls. It bends toward the polyp's mouth, bringing the stunned creature with it. Other tentacles might help, reaching over to assist. And slowly, the prey is delivered to the mouth. The polyp opens, the food goes in, digestion begins. One piece of zooplankton, smaller than a grain of rice. That's the meal. That's what all this elaborate hunting machinery captures. One microscopic animal. But multiply that by millions of polyps. Multiply that by every night of the year. And suddenly it adds up. The coral colony catches enough to supplement its diet, to provide essential nutrients the zooxanthellae can't make. Nitrogen, phosphorus, amino acids needed for growth. The feeding happens in rhythm with the current. Water flows across the reef, carrying plankton. The tentacles extend into that flow. They catch what they can. The current brings new prey. The cycle continues. All night long, every night, this gentle harvest. There's something almost meditative about it. The slow waving of tentacles, the patient waiting, the occasional capture, and the gradual curling motion that follows. No rush, no frenzy, just steady, rhythmic feeding. By morning, the tentacles retract. The polyps pull back into their cups. The coral returns to its daytime appearance. Smooth, still, like stone again. But the work has been done. Energy has been captured. The coral has eaten. This dual strategy, photosynthesis by day and hunting by night, gives coral an advantage. It's not entirely dependent on either food source. If the light is poor, it can hunt more. If plankton is scarce, it can rely more on its zooxanthellae. The flexibility helps it survive in changing conditions. Different coral species hunt with different intensity. Some are more dependent on catching prey. Their tentacles are longer, more aggressive. They might even catch small fish. Others barely hunt at all. relying almost entirely on their algae partners. They have short tentacles, rarely extended, but most coral strikes a balance. Some hunting, some farming. Both strategies working together. And every night, on every reef, the transformation happens. The stone becomes a garden of waving arms. The stillness becomes gentle motion. The coral shows its animal nature, reaching out into the current, catching what flows by. It's a reminder that coral is alive. Not just the structure, not just the ecosystem it creates, but the polyp itself, living, breathing, eating, surviving in its own quiet way. The sun will rise, the tentacles will retract, and the coral will return to its daytime work of farming light. But for now, in the darkness, it hunts. Patient, persistent, feeding on the ocean's endless bounty, one microscopic meal at a time. The tentacles wave, the polyps feed, but they're not working alone. They're talking to each other, not with sound, not with light, with chemistry. Coral polyps release chemicals into the water, constantly. These molecules carry information, messages that other polyps can detect and respond to. It's a language written in compounds so small you can't see them. Conversations happening in concentrations measured in parts per billion. When a coral is damaged, when something bites it or breaks it, the injured polyps release distress signals. Specific chemicals that say danger, threat, be careful. These molecules dissolve into the water and spread across the colony. Other polyps detect them through receptors on their tissue, and they respond. They might retract their tentacles faster, produce more mucus for protection, increase their defensive chemical production, all triggered by a chemical alarm from their neighbors. This happens across entire colonies. A fish takes a bite from one section of coral. Within minutes, polyps dozens of feet away are responding to the chemical signal. They're preparing for potential attack, even though they haven't been touched yet. It's a warning system, an early alert network running on chemistry instead of electricity. But the communication goes beyond danger. Coral polyps coordinate their spawning using chemical signals. Remember that mass spawning event, millions of polyps releasing eggs and sperm simultaneously? Chemical cues help synchronize that. One polyp might start producing spawning hormones. Those hormones leak into the water. Neighboring polyps detect them and begin their own preparations. The signal cascades across the reef. They're talking about reproduction, about timing, about when to release the next generation. Different chemical compounds carry different messages. Some signal stress, some signal readiness to spawn, some might indicate colony health or growth status. Scientists are still decoding this chemical language, still figuring out what each compound means. What we do know is that the water around a healthy reef is full of these messages. A constant flow of chemical information, moving between polyps, between colonies, even between different coral species. It's like an invisible internet, running on molecules instead of data packets. And it's not just coral talking to coral. Some fish can detect coral's chemical signals. They know when coral is stressed. They know when coral has been damaged. This helps them make decisions about where to shelter, where it's safe, where the reef is healthy enough to support them. The chemicals also affect predators. Some corals produce compounds that taste bad or are mildly toxic. When a fish bites coral and gets that unpleasant chemical experience, it learns, it remembers, and it's less likely to bite that coral again. The chemical becomes a defense, a way of teaching predators to hunt elsewhere. Coral mucus, that slimy coating on the surface, is loaded with chemicals, some antimicrobial, some that prevent other organisms from settling on the coral, some that attract beneficial bacteria while repelling harmful ones. It's chemical warfare and chemical diplomacy happening simultaneously on a microscopic scale. Think about the complexity here. Millions of polyps in a colony, each one producing and detecting dozens of different chemical compounds. Each compound carrying specific information. Each polyp responding appropriately to the signals it receives. All of this happening without a brain, without a nervous system beyond the most basic network. It's chemistry as communication, molecules as language, the ocean carrying conversations we can't hear or see, but that are essential to reef survival. And it never stops. Day and night, the chemicals flow, the messages spread, the polyps respond, an endless exchange of information, written in compounds that dissolve and disperse and deliver their meaning at concentrations so low we need specialized equipment to detect them. The coral talks in whispers, chemical whispers, quiet, invisible, but essential. And the reef listens, always listening, always responding. A community bound together by invisible threads of communication, by messages carried on currents, by chemistry turned into language. The conversation continues. It's been going on for millions of years. It will keep going, these chemical whispers in the water, as long as the coral survives. The coral communicates. It warns its neighbors. It coordinates survival. And sometimes, despite all these defenses, it gets hurt. A storm breaks off a branch. A fish takes a bite. A boat anchor drags across the reef. The damage is done. The tissue is torn. The skeleton is exposed. And then, quietly, the healing begins. Coral can regenerate, not quickly. Nothing about coral is quick, but it can repair itself. Broken pieces can regrow tissue. Wounds can close. Given enough time, the coral recovers. Here's how it works. When coral tissue is damaged, the surviving polyps at the edge of the wound start to expand. They grow larger than normal. They stretch their tissue toward the damaged area. Cell by cell, they creep across the exposed skeleton. It's like skin growing over a scrape. Slow, gradual, but effective. The polyps divide as they expand. 1 becomes 2. 2 become 4. New polyps form at the edge of the healing tissue. And together, they cover the wound. They protect the skeleton beneath. They restore the colony. But this takes time. A wound the size of your palm might take months to heal completely. A larger break might take a year or more. The coral doesn't rush. It can't. It heals at the same patient pace it does everything else. While the tissue is regrowing, the exposed skeleton is vulnerable. Algae can colonize it. Other organisms can settle on it. The coral has to compete for its own space, has to regrow tissue faster than competitors can claim the bare calcium carbonate. Sometimes it wins, sometimes it doesn't. If conditions are good, if the water is clean and the temperature is stable, and there's no additional stress, the coral can fully recover. The wound closes. The tissue covers the skeleton. You might never know the damage was there. But if conditions are poor, if the coral is already stressed from warm water or pollution or disease, healing slows down or stops entirely. The wound remains open, a permanent scar on the colony. Some coral species heal faster than others. Branching corals, the fast-growing ones, can regenerate quickly. They put energy into rapid tissue production. Massive boulder corals heal more slowly. They're built for endurance, not speed. Their healing matches their growth rate. Slow, steady, patient. Scientists have discovered that coral can even survive being broken into pieces. Take a healthy coral branch, break it into fragments, and attach those fragments to new substrate. If conditions are right, each piece will survive. Each will grow. Each will become a new colony. This is called coral fragmentation, and it's become a tool for reef restoration. Researchers grow coral in nurseries, break healthy colonies into pieces, and transplant those pieces to damaged reefs. The fragments heal, they grow, they help rebuild what was lost. But even this requires patience. A fragment the size of your fist might take 5 years to grow large enough to reproduce, 10 years to become a significant part of the reef structure. It's faster than waiting for natural recovery, but it's still measured in years, not months. The coral's ability to heal is remarkable, but it's not infinite. Repeated damage wears down the colony. Each injury takes energy to repair, energy that could have gone to growth or reproduction. Too much damage too often, and the coral can't keep up. It weakens. It becomes susceptible to disease. Eventually, it dies. This is why careful treatment matters. Why protecting reefs from anchors and pollution and physical damage is so important. Because while coral can heal, healing is hard. It's slow. It takes resources the coral might not have. But when healing works, when the colony successfully closes a wound and continues growing, it's a small miracle, a testament to resilience, to the stubborn persistence of life. The wound closes, the tissue spreads, the colony continues, scarred perhaps, changed but alive, still building, still growing, still here. Healing in slow motion, recovery measured in seasons. That's the way of coral. Coral can heal, it can recover from damage. But there's one thing that challenges it more than almost anything else: heat. Coral is incredibly sensitive to water temperature. Not just sensitive, but precise. Most reef-building corals thrive in water between 73 and 84 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a narrow window. Just 11 degrees. Go above that range, even by a degree or two, and the coral starts to stress. Stay above it for too long, and something dramatic happens. The coral bleaches. Bleaching. The word sounds gentle. It's not. It's a survival crisis playing out in real time. Here's what happens. When water temperature rises too high for too long, the zooxanthellae, those microscopic algae living inside the coral tissue, start to malfunction. The heat disrupts their photosynthesis. Instead of producing food, they produce toxins, dangerous compounds that damage the coral's cells. The coral faces a choice: keep the zooxanthellae and suffer from their toxic byproducts, or expel them and lose the primary food source. The coral chooses survival. It ejects the algae, all of them, millions of zooxanthellae, expelled from the tissue in a matter of days. And without them, the coral loses its color. Remember, the algae provide those golden browns and greens. The coral tissue itself is translucent. Remove the algae, and all you see is white. The white of the calcium carbonate skeleton showing through clear tissue. This is bleaching, not a disease, not death, but a stress response, a desperate measure. The bleached coral is still alive. The polyps are still there. The tissue remains, but now the coral is starving. It lost 90% of its nutrition when it lost the zooxanthellae. It can still catch zooplankton with its tentacles, but that's not enough. Not nearly enough. The coral needs the water to cool, needs conditions to return to normal. If that happens quickly, within a few weeks, the zooxanthellae can return. They can recolonize the tissue, the coral can recover. Color returns. The partnership resumes. But if the heat persists, if weeks turn into months, the coral begins to starve. It uses up its energy reserves. It stops growing. It stops reproducing. All resources go to basic survival. And eventually, if conditions don't improve, the coral dies. The tissue degrades. The skeleton remains, white and empty, a ghost of what was. Entire reefs can bleach. Miles of coral, all turning white in the same week. It's happened repeatedly in recent decades. Massive bleaching events triggered by unusually warm water. The ocean floor transformed from vibrant color to pale white. Some corals are more resistant than others. Some species can tolerate slightly higher temperatures. Some have zooxanthellae strains that function better in heat. But all have limits. All have a threshold beyond which they cannot survive. What makes this particularly challenging is that coral evolved over millions of years in relatively stable temperatures. Tropical oceans don't fluctuate much. They stay warm, but not too warm. Consistent, predictable. The coral adapted to that consistency. It needs that stability. Sudden changes, even small ones, throw off the delicate balance between coral and algae. The partnership that works so well under normal conditions becomes dangerous under stress. Temperature is memory for coral. Their skeletons record water temperature in their growth bands. Scientists can read these records and see how conditions have changed over centuries. And what those records show is that recent temperatures are outside the normal range, higher than coral has experienced in its long history. The coral can sense this. Its tissues detect the heat. Its zooxanthellae respond to it. The bleaching is not random. It's a biological reaction to environmental conditions the coral isn't equipped to handle. And yet, some coral survives. Some colonies in the hottest areas have adapted. They host different zooxanthellae. They've developed higher heat tolerance. Evolution in action, but happening very slowly for a problem that's accelerating. For now, coral needs what it's always needed: clean water, stable temperatures, time to grow, time to heal, the patient conditions that allowed it to build reefs for millions of years. Temperature matters, stability matters. The coral remembers this in every cell. Temperature affects coral deeply, but there's another force that shapes reef life, one that's been constant for millions of years: the moon. The moon pulls on Earth. Its gravity tugs at the oceans, creating tides. Twice a day, the water rises and falls. This rhythm, this endless cycle of high tide and low tide, is fundamental to how coral reefs work. When the tide comes in, it brings fresh seawater, new nutrients, more plankton, higher oxygen levels. The water flows across the reef, delivering what the coral needs and carrying away waste products. When the tide goes out, the water level drops. Some shallow corals might even be exposed to air briefly. It's stressful, but it's a stress coral has adapted to. Some species can survive short periods out of water. Their mucus protects them. Their tissue holds moisture. The tidal flow creates currents. These currents are essential. They prevent water from becoming stagnant around the reef. They ensure constant exchange. Fresh water in, old water out. The reef breathes with the tides, but the moon's influence goes deeper than just moving water. Coral tracks the lunar cycle. We talked about spawning synchronized to the full moon. That's just one example. The moon affects other aspects of coral biology too. Growth rates can vary with lunar cycles. Some studies show coral grows slightly faster during certain moon phases. The mechanism isn't fully understood, but coral is paying attention. Somehow, without eyes or a brain, it senses the moon's cycle. The full moon brings the strongest tides. Spring tides, they're called. The gravitational pull of the moon and sun align, creating higher highs and lower lows, more water, movement, more nutrient exchange. And coral has learned, over millions of years, to work with this rhythm. During full moons, some coral species feed more actively. Their tentacles extend more fully. They capture more plankton. It's as if they know the tides will bring abundance. The new moon has the opposite effect. Neap tides, less water movement, calmer conditions. Some coral uses this time differently. Less feeding, more energy devoted to growth or repair. It's a monthly rhythm layered on top of the daily rhythm of tides. The coral lives in multiple overlapping cycles, day and night, high tide and low tide, new moon and full moon. All of these affect how it functions. Think about the consistency of this. The moon has orbited Earth for billions of years. Its cycle has been reliable for the entire history of life on this planet. 29.5 days from new moon to new moon. Every month, every year, for eons. Coral evolved in this reliability. It built its biology around patterns it could trust. The sun will rise, the tides will turn, the moon will complete its cycle. These are certainties in an uncertain world, and coral needs these certainties, needs the predictable rhythms, because everything else about reef life is variable. Water temperature can change, storms can strike, predators can attack, disease can spread. But the moon is constant. Its pull never wavers. Its cycle never breaks. And coral has anchored itself to that constancy. There's something profound about that. About an animal without a brain tracking celestial mechanics. About a creature that can't see the moon responding to its presence. About life on the ocean floor synchronized to patterns in the sky. The moon pulls on the tides. The tides shape the reef. The reef times its life to both. It's a connection that spans Earth and space, water and sky, geology and biology, and it's been working for longer than we can properly comprehend. The same moon that pulled on ancient seas pulls on modern oceans. The same tides that bathed Cambrian reefs bathe today's reefs. The pattern continues, reliable and ancient. Coral follows the moon, always has, always will. As long as both exist, the connection remains. Gravity linking life to light, water to sky, patience to cycles that measure time in phases and tides. The moon pulls silently. The tides flow without sound above water. You might imagine the reef as a quiet place. Still, peaceful, silent. You'd be wrong. Coral reefs are loud. Not loud like a city or a highway, but full of sound. Constant sound. A symphony playing underwater that most people never hear. Put a hydrophone, an underwater microphone, near a healthy reef, and you'll hear what sounds like breakfast cereal in milk. Crackles, pops, snaps. Thousands of tiny sounds overlapping, creating a blanket of noise that never stops. The loudest contributors. Snapping shrimp. These small crustaceans, barely bigger than your thumb, have one oversized claw. When they snap it shut, they create a cavitation bubble. The bubble collapses almost instantly, producing a sound louder than a gunshot. One shrimp, one snap. Loud enough to stun small fish. Now multiply that by thousands, millions, because healthy reefs are packed with snapping shrimp, and they're snapping constantly, hunting, defending territory, communicating. Each snap adds to the reef's soundtrack. The sound is so loud, so persistent, that it actually interferes with sonar. Submarines have trouble operating near coral reefs because the shrimp create too much acoustic noise. Tiny animals creating confusion for military technology. But the shrimp aren't alone in making noise. Parrotfish crunch. Literally crunch. These fish have beaks made of fused teeth. They use these beaks to bite coral, scraping off algae. And the sound of beak hitting calcium carbonate skeleton carries through water. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Like someone eating chips underwater. A single parrotfish can take dozens of bites per minute. A reef might have hundreds of parrotfish. Do the math. That's thousands of crunches per hour. The sound becomes a background rhythm, the pulse of herbivores doing their work. And here's a strange fact. Parrotfish don't just eat the algae. They eat the coral skeleton too. They digest what they can and excrete the rest as sand. Fine, white sand. One large parrotfish can produce up to a ton of sand per year. The beautiful white beaches of tropical islands, made largely from parrotfish poop. But back to sound. Fish grunt. They produce sound by vibrating their swim bladders. Different species make different noises. Some grunt, some hum. Some produce clicking sounds. And during spawning season, the reef gets even louder. Males calling for females. Territorial disputes. The sound of reproduction. Urchins scrape. Their teeth work continuously, grinding algae off rock. The sound is subtle, but it's there. A quiet rasping that adds texture to the reef's audio landscape. Even the water itself makes sound. Currents flowing through coral branches. Waves breaking on the reef crest. The physical movement of water creates noise. White noise. Background static. And the coral. Does it make sound? Yes. Barely audible, but yes. As coral grows, as it deposits calcium carbonate, as crystals form and lock into place, there are tiny acoustic emissions. Micro crackles. Sounds so quiet, you need sensitive equipment to detect them. But they're there. The sound of stone being built. Scientists have discovered that these sounds matter. Fish larvae drifting in the open ocean can hear healthy reefs from miles away. They use sound to navigate, to find home. A healthy reef sounds busy, alive, full of opportunity, and young fish swim toward that sound. This means reef sound is an indicator of health. Loud reef equals healthy reef. Quiet reef equals damaged reef. You can assess reef condition just by listening. Some conservation projects are experimenting with playing reef sounds through underwater speakers near damaged reefs. The idea is to attract fish back, to jumpstart recovery by making dead reefs sound alive. Early results are promising. Fish return, and with fish come nutrients. With nutrients comes growth. The ocean is never truly silent, especially not around coral. The reef hums with life, crackles with activity, pulses with the sounds of eating and growing and defending and reproducing. Close your eyes and you might hear waves. Open your ears underwater and you hear a city, a metropolis of sound. Small creatures making big noise. The reef announcing its presence to anyone listening. That's the unexpected truth. Coral reefs are loud. Wonderfully, surprisingly loud. The reef makes sound. It announces its presence. But coral offers something else too. Something humans discovered long ago. Healing. For thousands of years, coastal cultures have used coral in traditional medicine. Not as superstition. Not as magic. But as practical remedies based on observation and experience. The most obvious use was calcium. Coral skeleton is pure calcium carbonate. Grind it into powder and you have a calcium supplement. Ancient healers used this for bone health, for teeth, for conditions they recognized as calcium deficiency, even if they didn't call it that. In some cultures, coral powder was mixed into salves for wounds. The calcium helped stop bleeding. It promoted clotting. Modern science confirms this. Calcium ions do play a role in blood coagulation. The traditional healers were right. Coral was also used for bone grafts. This might sound strange, but it works. Coral skeleton has a porous structure similar to human bone. Surgeons can shape coral into the right size and implant it where bone is missing. Over time, human bone grows into the coral structure. The coral becomes a scaffold, a framework that the body fills in. This is still used today. Medical-grade coral bone grafts. The same. Calcium structure that took decades to build in the ocean now helps rebuild human skeletons. The slow growth of coral, that patient deposition of minerals, creates exactly the right texture for bone to colonize. But researchers have found something else in coral, something unexpected. Chemical compounds with unusual properties. Coral produces defensive chemicals. Remember, it's a soft-bodied animal sitting exposed on the reef. It can't run. It can't hide. So, it makes compounds that discourage predators, that prevent infection, that fight off competitors. Scientists started studying these compounds. They found molecules that kill bacteria, natural antibiotics produced by coral to keep its tissue clean. Some of these compounds work against bacteria that resist standard antibiotics. They attack in different ways. They might become new medicines. Other coral compounds show anti-inflammatory properties. They reduce swelling. They calm immune responses. Researchers are testing them for arthritis treatment, for autoimmune diseases, for conditions where the body's defense system attacks itself. Some compounds affect cancer cells. They slow growth. They trigger cell death. They interfere with tumor blood supply. It's early research. Nothing proven yet. But the potential is there. The chemicals coral uses to survive might help humans survive too. The challenge is harvesting. Coral grows so slowly. You can't just collect it for medicine. A colony that took a century to grow can't be sacrificed for research. So scientists are learning to synthesize these compounds in labs, to copy what coral makes naturally, to produce the medicine without harming the reef. This work takes time. Identifying compounds, understanding how they work, testing them, modifying them, getting approval. The process can take decades, but then coral itself works in decades. Maybe that's fitting. Slow medicine from slow organisms. What strikes me is the wisdom embedded in traditional practices. Coastal communities knew coral had value beyond food and shelter. They experimented. They observed. They passed down knowledge. Modern science is confirming what they discovered through experience. There's something humbling about that. About finding that ancient remedies have scientific basis. That traditional healers understood properties we're only now explaining with chemistry and biology. Coral has been healing people for thousands of years, providing calcium, supporting bone growth, and now potentially offering new medicines for modern diseases, all from an animal that builds at a glacial pace, that deposits minerals molecule by molecule, the slowest growth, the most patient construction, and hidden in that calcium structure, in those defensive compounds, are tools for healing, for mending, for helping life continue. Coral builds home for fish. It builds medicine for humans. It builds connections between traditional knowledge and modern science, between ocean and land, between the patient work of millennia and the urgent needs of today. The The wisdom of slow-growing things. That's what coral offers. Lessons written in calcium and chemistry, waiting to be read. Coral offers healing. It offers medicine. But there's another gift in that slow-growing skeleton. Something unexpected. History. Coral records time. Every year of growth creates a band in the skeleton. Dense calcium deposited in cooler months. Less dense calcium in warmer months. The pattern alternates. Light band, dark band, light, dark, just like tree rings. Scientists can cut a core sample from a coral colony, a long cylinder of skeleton drilled from the living tissue down through centuries of growth. Polish that core and the bands become visible. Count them and you know the coral's age. Read them and you know what conditions were like when each band formed. One band equals 1 year. Simple as that. A coral 200 years old has 200 bands, each one a snapshot of the ocean in that particular year. Temperature, salinity, chemical composition, all recorded in the density and chemistry of the calcium carbonate. Scientists can analyze the isotopes in each band. Oxygen isotopes tell about water temperature. Carbon isotopes indicate ocean chemistry. Trace elements reveal pollution levels. The coral captured this information as it grew, embedding it in its skeleton without knowing it was creating a record. This makes coral a climate archive, a library of ocean conditions going back centuries. Places where we have no temperature records, where no one was taking measurements, we can still know what the ocean was like. Because the coral was there, growing, recording. Some coral colonies are old enough to show conditions before industrialization, before humans significantly altered the atmosphere. These ancient corals show us what normal used to be, what baseline ocean chemistry looked like, what temperatures were before everything changed. And the records show change, clear, undeniable change. Water temperatures rising, ocean chemistry shifting. The patterns in modern growth bands look different from bands laid down a century ago. The coral documents the transformation in its skeleton. This is powerful evidence. Not models, not predictions. Direct measurement, physical proof. The ocean was this temperature then. It's this temperature now. The coral knows. The coral recorded it. But the rings tell more than just temperature. They record events. El Niño years show up as distinct patterns. Major storms create damage marks. Volcanic eruptions that put ash in the atmosphere affect coral growth, and that shows in the bands. Scientists have found bands that correspond to the eruption of Krakatoa in 1883, to the year without a summer in 1816, caused by Mount Tambora. Events that happened before modern record keeping, confirmed by coral that was alive and growing when they occurred. Some corals are old enough to record pre-contact history, before European ships arrived in the Pacific, before colonization. The skeletons hold information about climate and ocean conditions in times we have no other way to access. It's like finding a book written in a language you didn't know existed. Each band is a sentence. Each element is a word. Together, they tell stories. Stories about the ocean's past, about how it's changed, about what used to be normal. The reading is technical. It requires expensive equipment, mass spectrometers, X-ray scanners, computer analysis. But the information is there, preserved perfectly in calcium. And here's what gets me about this. The coral wasn't trying to keep records. It wasn't documenting climate for future scientists. It was just growing, depositing calcium, living. And in the process of living, in the simple act of building its skeleton year after year, it created an archive, an accidental historian, a witness that doesn't know it witnessed. The coral just exists, and existence becomes testimony. Every old coral is a time capsule. Every growth ring is a page in Earth's diary. The patient work of building layer by layer becomes the patient work of preservation. History written in stone, climate recorded in calcium. The coral grows, the rings form, the record continues, and scientists read backward through time, learning what the ocean remembers, what the coral, in its slow, silent way, has been keeping track of all along. The coral records history. It preserves time in its skeleton. But step back for a moment. Look at everything we've learned, and notice the pattern. Everything coral does, it does slowly, growing, millimeters per year, healing, months to close a wound, building, centuries to create a reef, reproducing, once a year, synchronized to the moon. Even feeding happens in slow motion, tentacles waving gently, prey drifting by. There's no rush, no urgency, no deadline. This is patience on a scale we struggle to comprehend. Not patience like waiting in line. Not patience like enduring a difficult task. But patience as a fundamental way of existing. As the only way of existing. Coral can't hurry. Its biology won't allow it. The chemistry of depositing calcium takes time. The partnership with zooxanthellae develops slowly. Growth happens at the rate of molecular construction, one crystal at a time, one layer at a time. And yet, this slowness creates permanence. The fastest growing organisms rarely last. Bacteria divide in minutes, but die in hours. Insects live weeks or months. Even most plants and animals measure their lives in years or decades. But coral measures life in centuries. Individual colonies that were alive before your great-great-grandparents were born. Reefs that existed before recorded history. Structures that have stood longer than any human civilization. The slow wins in the end. The patient outlasts the quick. There's something deeply calming about this. In a world that values speed and efficiency and rapid growth, coral just keeps doing what it's always done, building at a pace that seems impossibly slow. And that pace works. It's worked for 500 million years. Think about what that means for your own life. The things you build slowly often last longer than things you rush. Relationships developed over years are stronger than instant connections. Skills practiced daily for decades surpass talents rushed through boot camps. Knowledge accumulated gradually sticks better than information crammed overnight. Coral teaches this without trying to teach anything. It just exists. It demonstrates through being. Slow is strong. Patient is powerful. Consistent beats intense. Every polyp adds its tiny contribution. Every night, every year, for its entire life. And it never sees the final structure. It never knows how its work combines with millions of others to create something vast. It just builds. Because that's what it does. There's purpose in that. Meaning without needing to understand the meaning. Work that matters because the work itself is the point. You don't need to build cathedrals to live like coral. You just need to do your thing, consistently, patiently, without rushing, without demanding immediate results. Let the days add up. Let the years accumulate. Trust that small actions, repeated, create something lasting. Coral doesn't worry about the reef. It builds its cup. The reef happens naturally when millions of cups combine over thousands of years. And when damage comes, when storms break branches or predators bite tissue, coral doesn't panic. It doesn't mourn what was lost. It just starts healing, slow, patient, the same way it does everything else. This is resilience, not fighting back, not dramatic recovery, just persistent existence, just continuing. The wound will heal when it heals. Until then, the coral lives. We could learn from this, from doing one thing well, repeatedly, without complaint, from building without seeing the final structure, from healing at whatever pace healing requires, from existing in harmony with natural rhythms instead of fighting them. The great patience of coral isn't a strategy, it's not a choice, it's simply how coral is. But watching it, understanding it, shows us something valuable. That slow work accumulates, that patient effort compounds, that you don't need to hurry to arrive at something magnificent. Just keep building, one small piece at a time, day after day, year after year. That's enough. That's always been enough. The coral knows this. It's always known this. And it keeps building, patient and persistent, creating forever from now. Patience, persistence, building one small piece at a time. That's the lesson of coral. But there's one more thing to understand. We're connected. Coral and humans. We share the same ocean. We depend on the same water. We need the same basic conditions. And what affects one affects the other. Coral needs clean water. So do we. Pollution that damages reefs comes from rivers, from runoff, from coastal development. The same contamination that makes coral sick can make us sick. Coral needs stable temperatures. So do we. The warming that causes bleaching is the same warming that melts ice caps and changes weather patterns. We're in this together, living on the same changing planet. Coral needs time to heal. So do we. Rush recovery and you get poor results. Force growth and structures weaken. Whether you're a polyp or a person, healing requires patience. The parallel is striking. We face similar challenges. We need similar solutions. Clean environment, stable conditions, time and space to recover when damaged. And here's what gives me hope. Coral has survived for 500 million years, through ice ages and warm periods, through asteroid impacts and volcanic eruptions, through 5 mass extinctions. It's still here, still building, still persisting. That resilience is in its nature. That capacity to endure, to heal, to continue, is built into every polyp. And if coral can persist through all that, maybe we can learn from its example. We've spent this time together, exploring something small that builds something vast. An animal without a brain that creates structures of extraordinary complexity. A creature that moves slowly but arrives at permanence. And maybe, as you close your eyes tonight, you can carry some of that calm with you. That sense of patient building, of trusting in slow processes, of knowing that small actions, repeated, create lasting change. Picture yourself floating, gentle currents moving around you, the weight of the day dissolving. You're suspended in warm water, safe and supported, rocking slowly with the rhythm of the tide. Below you, coral is growing, right now, tonight, adding its microscopic layer, building its cup, continuing work that began before you were born and will continue after you're gone. There's something peaceful in that, in knowing the world keeps turning, the tides keep flowing, the coral keeps building, everything continues, including you, including your breath, in and out, slow and steady. If this journey brought you peace, if you enjoyed exploring the quiet world of coral, I'd love for you to subscribe. Join us for more gentle science, more calm curiosity, more peaceful discoveries. And to tell me, where did you listen from tonight? What brought you here? I love hearing from you, your thoughts, your reflections. Leave a comment. Share what resonated. Next time, we'll explore something else fascinating, something else worth understanding, another piece of the natural world that deserves our attention and wonder. But for now, let the coral teach its final lesson. Rest, let go, trust in slow processes. You don't need to build everything tonight. You don't need to solve everything now. Just breathe, just be. Just exist for a moment in the quiet spaces between thoughts. Like a polyp in its cup. Like a reef in the ocean. Present, patient, peaceful. The coral will still be building when you wake. The ocean will still be flowing. And you'll still be here, ready for whatever comes next. Thank you for this time together, for your curiosity, for your attention, for joining me in this gentle exploration of tiny animals that build vast worlds. Sleep well, rest easy, let the currents carry you somewhere calm. The reef is always there, the coral is always building, and you always are enough. Good night.